everyone. I'm Valessa Faria from the City of Toronto, and I'm joined today by my colleague Anne-Marie Crochet. We're very excited to be joining you today. Sorry we couldn't be there in person, but we're very excited to talk to you about the City of Toronto's Housing Data Hub. We recently launched a Housing Data Hub, which has been instrumental in helping us to advance our tenure housing strategy objectives. And today we'll go through a few slides in terms of the purpose of our hub, as well as the process that we went through to get to launching the hub. But before we start, I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge that Anne-Marie and I are both joining you from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 of the Mississaugas of the Credit. Thank you. So we've prepared a few short slides, which we will share. So City of Toronto's Housing Data Hub. The purpose of our data hub is to enhance public accountability and transparency. So why did we do this? So a bit about the housing and homeless situation in Toronto. There's currently a lack of housing options for low, moderate, and middle-income households. And just to emphasize the scale and scope of need in Toronto, about 10,000 individuals experience active homelessness each night. And these are people who are within our shelter system, as well as those sleeping rough on the streets. And about 48% of all Toronto households are renters, and about 40% of renters are living in poor housing need. Specifically, they are unable to afford the cost of housing. Further, about 1 in 3 Toronto owner and renter households are living in core housing needs. So in addition to experiencing housing affordability, they're also living in inadequate housing. And while only about 8% of the city's population identify as Indigenous, about 15% of our shelter system has Indigenous residents, and Black Torontonians are overrepresented as well in our Toronto housing system. So really signifying the need for us to do better as a city to provide more housing opportunities for low and moderate income residents, which includes Black and Indigenous residents who are overrepresented in our shelter system. So the City of Toronto has a big housing plan. It's called the Housing TO 2020-2030 Action Plan. And this is a robust plan that really provides a blueprint for all of our actions and investments in housing across the full continuum. So on the right of my slide, you will see the key strategic focus of our housing plan. And focus number 12 is really about improving accountability and transparency in the delivery of housing. And our housing TO plan, just to give you a sense of the scale of the plan, to deliver the plan by 2030, it's estimated to cost all orders of government about $47 billion. And that includes building about 65,000 new rent control homes, as well as improving housing accessibility and affordability for residents. So as mentioned, a key strategic focus of our housing plan is increasing transparency and accountability. And for the City of Toronto, this means making sure that our data is accessible and it's easy to digest. And digestible data is really important for us, for residents across Toronto to understand our housing needs, for building stakeholder and public awareness about what needs to be done to address our very challenging housing and homelessness crisis. It also supports the city in our intergovernmental advocacy efforts to attract new and sustained funding in housing. And ultimately, it helps to build public confidence in in the work that we're doing to meet our housing targets. And for us, at the end of the day, we recognize that good data is ultimately critical to improving lives for our residents. So Anne-Marie will walk you through about what we've done since January 2022 to help advance our collective housing and data objectives.
Great, thanks, Valessa. So in January 2022, Valessa and I had a conversation about how our teams can help support the sort of vision and the data strategy. So a little bit about my team. We are part of what is the I-Team, or the Innovation Network, through Bloomberg Philanthropies. We started the grant based way back in 2017, and the grant ended about 2 to 3 years ago, but we're still sort of really robust in that network, and we still work on the same principles. So our approach, and those of you who are familiar with human-centered design, this is not uncommon for you. So we work in sort of 3 buckets: understanding the problem, generating ideas, and then delivering. So on the core focus, and you'll see in January, we're really kind of working on to understanding the why and what we're trying to do with the data, and sort of how we want to visualize it, who is interested in the data, and looking into a lot of really in-depth research. So understanding the how. Over that spring in 2022, we had 52 conversations, and you can see we tried to have, and we always try to have a really robust list of people that we speak to. Those are interested in the subject, and those that maybe have a high level of influence, but may not have a high level of interest, and sort of really kind of understand their viewpoints and their understandings. And this really, after these conversations, we really understood that we needed to create a product that was stakeholder centric and all stakeholder centric, not just for one end users, but we learned that there was a multiple use of people who are really interested in the City of Toronto housing data. So in our insight model here, you can see outcomes. We had the measurable impact, stakeholder engagement, and trust building with residents. And we knew how important the trust building with residents is. Vanessa talks about in the first slide about sort of the systematic and historical issues that we're facing, but also sort of what's real and what's happening today. So we really wanted to kind of make sure that what we do with data really kind of supports that trust and building with residents. And then as a city, how do we create better data, reliable, current, and useful, to make it as transparent as we can? And then building capacity across the Housing Secretariat as well as other divisions, creating a data governance and framework and standards, looking at cross-divisional data sharing, which we'll get into in a few slides, and then resources, looking at the people and the technology that we need to make this product, but also to make this product sustainable. So let's talk about some of the themes that we heard and from our initial interviews and engagement. So we needed a standardization of practice. And this is from internal staff and some community agencies. So we've learned, one, without a clear set of data standards at the city, data practices and methods remain inconsistent. So there is no one data governance, there's no one sort of architecture in the city that supports data. Every division does it differently, and sometimes even every divisions and every teams within divisions do it separately. We have different technologies, we have different programs, we have different sort of regulations, and we have different tracking methods. Without standards comes the need for in-house resourcing and expertise. So we also recognize the fact that as a city, we don't always have the best staff to be able to support it. I say always that if I can hire more staff, it would probably be a data scientist. My colleagues out in LA on their I-Team have 11 data scientists. But again, it's having that recognition and understanding that, in-house resources and supports are definitely needed to keep the standard of practice. Theme 2, the data itself. So we learned that all stakeholders group requested development data. This is not uncommon, and I'm sure you folks on the call today, this is not a surprising insight. People would like to track end-to-end processes, from when a developer has an idea to build, to council approval, to development, to measure timelines, and understanding the barriers to build. 100% of academics and 60% of community agencies requested increased data sets on housing instability. And you can see here, there's one of the quotes that we thought was really impactful, but missing the back end story. Who is not included in the data captured? What is the larger narrative around it? i.e. 10 evictions, what is the larger context? What's not captured? Not quantifiable data pieces around that. The desired format and the presentation of data varies depending on the stakeholder. When you just throw numbers, they're just numbers. And when you hear stories straight from people's experiencing things, it drives a whole different ballgame and drives different results. The Housing Secretariat should create a dashboard on how they're achieving their targets to Indigenous people in the Housing TO Action Plan. How are we committed to 500 affordable units for Indigenous people? And that was directly from an Indigenous housing provider. So that was 2020. I'm going to fast forward a little bit into our January 2023. So we've captured a couple of hurdles from that stakeholder partition to January 2023, and we had an accelerated timeline. We were mandated by Mayor Tory at the time and council that we had to deliver on dashboards. So what were some of our hurdles in being able to deliver that in a short period of time? One, obviously time. We had 3 months to deliver a product from research to generate ideas and to actually kind of implement the idea. We needed data collection and we needed validity on the data. This was something that was very, very important to us, that if we're going to put forward information, that we are strongly supporting the information that we put forward. Aligning with several partners, the Housing Secretariat, Technology Services, City Planning, and multiple communications teams. Accountability to the timelines. We have to keep staff accountable to providing us the data, when we're going to update it, as well as when it's going to go live. And if you've ever visited the toronto.ca website, you will not be surprised when I say this, but the City of Toronto website does not offer much flexibility. So that was also a challenge to make this data come live. Accessibility and compliance. So we were balancing tools and experience and really making something that is accessible and compliance to, and so that everybody has a fair access to read and understand the data. So in December 14, as I'd mentioned, Mayor Tory had given us direct mandate. I just wanted to pull this out for you. And here is sort of what we were kind of as a mandate was created in order for us to do and sort of move on that 3-month time frame. So you can see here, we were requested to develop a publicly available database to track affordable rental units approved, under construction, built, demolished under Section 667 of the Toronto Municipal Code, and replaced through rental replacement and dwelling rooms. So that mandate allowed us to kind of really accelerate on what we can do. So here's a little bit of our time frame. From January to March, we had everything from the kickoff to the launch. And then afterwards, we created a sustainability plan and then figuring out a way that we can better improve our version 2 and then the versions beyond that. I think we've now have, I think there's, the latest version was just launched last week. We also understood how important the data was, but the data storytelling was. Data becomes completely meaningless if it doesn't encourage exploration and communication. We wanted to enable people to interpret complex information. We wanted people to understand the why, make more informed housing decisions on their situations or about understanding the Housing TO plan. But the challenge is telling the story through multiple divisions' perspective to create one story, one narrative, one voice for our stakeholders. So as our team does, and when we're sort of understanding and generating, we kind of always take a step back to make sure that we really understand our users. So we wanted to focus in on our residents. And so we did a couple of pop-up locations where we wanted to learn more about what sort of specific information people wanted and how they wanted it seen. So pop-up engagement venues were selected using our open data to identify neighborhoods that may be at a higher risk of housing instability. So we did this by cross-analyzing neighborhood improvement areas, housing eviction help centers, and the City of Toronto operated social and supportive housing locations. So my team kind of divided and conquered, and we had 5 different locations, 15 hours, and we were really actually interested in speaking to children and seniors about sort of how they understood the data and sort of what and visualizations to make it as simple as possible. And here are some of us at the community centers and setting up. And again, when we are prototyping and we're going out to the community, we're really focused on one, meeting people where they're at. So oftentimes at community centers, you know, standing in front of a door or in a highly sort of high traffic area and making it in a really, really simple way that we just want to hear from people and hear what they need, hear about how they want to visualize, but also understand sort of what sites that they visit, not just around housing data, but just data in general. How do they find analytics? How do they sort of, what are they kind of interested in? Is it trends? Is it usability? Do they share information? To better understand how we can support residents looking at this data. So after those pop-ups, we had some key themes. Residents are most concerned about what's happening in or close to their neighborhoods. They also want to stay in their neighborhood. So they want to know what's close by if they were to move to another location. When asked about a map, most residents said they would use a map that has existing and proposed affordable and social housing units. Many residents were confused what constituted affordable. Almost all residents we spoke to were aware of the wait list and were either on it themselves or knew people on it. And there was a lot of frustration around the the rent geared to income wait list. Residents want more engagement. Somebody actually said to us at Regent Park, I really appreciate the city coming here to talk to people. So I had mentioned a few slides ago about kind of creating a product that was compliant and accessible for everybody. So some of our big challenges here was the AODA compliant. Tableau is a system that we would have liked to use, but it is not AODA compliant. So our technology service staff actually created a dashboard for us that is kind of similar, but was actually AODA compliant. We were making sure that we wrote in plain language. We wanted to make sure that every text was legible, making sure that every hyperlink or table was accessible, that every single image had alternative text or visual content. And we ran an accessibility checker multiple times to make sure that there wasn't anything that we missed. So this is what the Data Hub looks at our first iteration. So as you can see, the first page, the one on the left, is our landing page. We have the Housing Data Hub, Affordable Housing Rental Map, and our Social Housing Rental Map. And then when you click on the Affordable Housing Rental Map, you can see here, and you can filter it through different neighborhoods. And then at the bottom here, you can toggle different things such as transit stops, schools, and other information so that people can really kind of understand the neighborhood when they're making a housing decision. And then on the right-hand side, you can see how we try to use that data and visualize it in a really, really simple way. So we've taken sort of that initial data hub that launched in March 2023, and in September, we had launched the Housing TO into a more robust dashboard. And Vanessa can speak a little bit more to this, but we tried to bring the policy of the Housing TO Hub into something here that is visual. And you can see we use the colors, the green and the red, to really indicate sort of if we're on track. The Housing TO action plan is, as Vanessa said, is a very ambitious 10-year plan. And we want to make sure that the plan is that we are transparent to our residents, we are transparent to the public, we are transparent to all of our stakeholders so that we are able to access this information as much as possible. Vanessa, did you want to speak to anything on the slide specifically?
The only thing I will say is that having, our experience has been that having these dashboards readily available has really helped City Council as well as our other funders, other orders of government to understand where we're doing well, where we're meeting our targets, and where we need additional investments. And it has also helped our stakeholders, whether it be members of the public or housing advocates, to lend their voices and strengthen, amplify our messages that we need housing for specific groups. As an example, the slide shows that we are underachieving in our target for Indigenous homes. So that is one area where we've been able, again, to increase our advocacy, or joint advocacy rather, and efforts with others who are active in the housing space in Toronto, and give them the tools to help us help them essentially.
Mhm.
So that's what I would add. Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Yeah. And I would just say that, from a government perspective, a lot of our partners and divisions are really, really reluctant to share the data. Velessa is a great partner of ours, and being that level of transparency around sort of, where do we need help and what are we not achieving? And sometimes working with other divisions, they're really, really reluctant to say that. They understand having, they like something in the red is a problem rather than seeing it as an opportunity to ask questions and support. But that was something that we struggled with a lot of the data, was making sure, having our partners being comfortable or being uncomfortable being uncomfortable, that having their data exposed isn't a bad thing. The exposure allows for transparency. The exposure allows for people to be, ask questions at the city to better understand sort of what they can and cannot do. So you can see here that recently added data sets, we have the Housing TO Action Plan here at the bottom. It's part of the City of Toronto's open data portal, of course. But as we were saying, I think this is one of the first sort of really transparent about, what the city is doing into policy to action. And it's, I think it's something that's changing the culture at the city. As we said, our conversations had very much changed from the spring of 2022 to the conversations that we have today with our partners. And they have become a lot more willing to share information. The mandate in January 2023 forced our divisions that they had to share this information with us to make it public. But from that time to now, I would say that it's changing the culture within the city. It allows for more honesty and honesty within government. It's allowing kind of bringing policy and data through story making. We believe it's improving residents' trust through the ease of understanding their data and the data and what sort of the other supports that are available within that housing realm. And it's creating an environment that is transparent, and it's allowing people to ask questions and give them sort of a lens into our housing situation that's sometimes not buried into a really dense policy document. So just quickly, some media coverage and social media since we've launched the hub. We can see here we have the CBC articles. Giving them public access to information is one place is a great step. Now it'll be easier for people to make informed decisions. Toronto approved 19,700 affordable rentals. Only about 1,600 have been built. The City of Toronto launched a new data hub as part of the action plan. The Toronto government launches a housing transparency portal. And then we have some social media coverage as well, on Twitter, on Reddit. Awesome. So I'm going to turn this over to Valessa around talking about our next steps for 2024.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. So our presentation today was to really give you some insight into the challenges in Toronto in terms of the housing and homelessness context, as well as how data has helped us to bring more public awareness to the issue to help us improve our advocacy, not only as government, but to give other stakeholders the tools that they need to also join in that advocacy. And I think I would say we've been successful in the fact that we're seeing more investments coming into the city, not nearly enough that we need to really address the housing and homelessness crisis, but there is traction. And for the City of Toronto, what's next? We're going to continue to build on these dashboards. We're going to continue to iterate. We're going to continue to engage the public, engage our stakeholders, to find more simpler ways to present information, and to continue to shed light into what we're doing well, where we're stalled, and where we need help. So in a nutshell, the Housing Data Hub has really helped us to try to address our housing crisis, and it's been a critical tool. So from our perspective, we see data as a critical tool in solving the housing and homelessness crisis. And we're hoping other cities across Canada will join in and launch similar dashboards and bring new ideas to the space. So with
And
that,
Oh, sorry, Vanessa. I was just going to say, to add to that, I think Vanessa touched on a really good point. We are committed to ongoing resident and stakeholder engagement throughout the process. We only learn from understanding people's experiences and their feedback. And I think that's something that our team is very, very kind of open to, is that continuous learning and that continuous iteration. So we are not just stuck on a product and we just don't, launch something and then walk away. We want to make sure that we understand ways that we can improve it. We look at KPIs, KEIs, so that we make sure that we are kind of matching the needs of the people that we're trying to serve. I'm sorry, be it residents, be it staff, be it other agencies. So having those continuous conversations is something that our team is committed to for, to better improve all the dashboards for housing.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you very much for joining us today. And if you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to connect with you via email. And we're hoping that other cities across Canada will join in, and we can have a big national dashboard party where we bring more awareness to our housing context and see data as a key tool in solving Toronto's and Canada's housing crisis. Thank you.